Hi, everyone. You're watching the Asian American Herald, a new media network featuring the Asian Americans across the United States. My name is Shruti Natanmai, and I'm a student at the Fashion Institute of Technology, writer and creative who's born and raised in the Capital Region. This evening, I'm super excited to speak with Anjali Arvind, a sophomore at Stony Brook University, and Niranjana Srihari, a junior at the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Of course. So I'd like to start by asking you both to take a minute to introduce yourselves a little bit more and tell our viewers about your background, your major, what are some of your interests. Anjali, if you want to start.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Anjali Arvind. I'm from Westchester County, New York, and currently I'm a sophomore at Stony Brook University. I'm a business major, and some of my interests are movies, food, and music.
Awesome. Niranjana?
Hi, everyone. I'm Niranjana Srihari. I'm a junior at the University of Texas at Austin. I'm originally from New York, and now I'm here in Dallas, Texas. I'm a finance major, and some of my interests include cooking and reading as well.
What kind of cooking?
Anything. I'm just learning, honestly.
That's fair. That's fair. I should probably be doing more of that too. So Anjali, as a sophomore and Niranjana as a junior, you've already spent at least 1 year of school in a normal environment. So going into this semester, what were you most anxious about? Like, what were you most upset about in regards to losing with your college experience?
So going into the semester, I was really nervous about not having as many people on campus. But one of the reasons I came back to campus was because I got to room with one of my best friends who's also in my sorority. And so having her on campus is one of the major reasons I came back, because obviously you're alone all the time, but having a roommate is so nice to have on campus.
Mm-hmm. And Niranjana, you did the semester remotely at your house and not in a college campus environment. So what were you most anxious about?
I think because I didn't have that roommate or somebody to kind of lean on during the semester, it was definitely harder because in business we have a lot of group projects and just group work in general. So communicating with the other group members and just making sure we're all on the same page virtually is a lot harder versus being on campus and saying, hey, can we all meet at this time and, go through it together. So doing it all from home was a little bit isolated and hard to work with at first, but as the semester went on, it got a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And so Anjali, as Niranjana said, with group projects and basically just communication, did you find that easier to do when you were on campus? Or even with the precautions in place, did you find that it didn't really make a difference?
Yeah, so I felt like because all my classes were online, I didn't really see a difference in staying home versus being on campus, since a lot of time the people in my class weren't on campus either. So I had to use the same communication things. Like we had Google Docs, we could communicate over group chats, and so because of that, I didn't really see a difference between being on campus and being remote.
Mm-hmm. So Niranjana, did you find anything that was helpful or a pleasant surprise with remote work from your house? Did you find anything to work in your favor that you didn't expect going into the semester?
Yeah, I think so. There is definitely pros and cons to being with your roommates and having those people around you. I think one of the pros, I guess, to being home is that you don't really have those other distractions. So you're a little bit more motivated to do all this stuff, and you're not taking breaks to go talk to your roommates or go to other things. So I feel like I was a lot more focused at home. And I think something that really helped me throughout this semester that was, I guess, a pleasant surprise is planning. I was okay, I'm actually going to use my planner this semester, and I'm going to make sure it's down to the minute and everything. And it helped. I mean, I didn't follow it 100%, but it helped a lot to at least get my mind in the right place and focused.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I'm also home this semester, and honestly, I kind of found it the opposite, where I was almost more distracted just because I was looking for things to distract me, if that makes sense. Going out of my way to distract myself because I'm so used to that influx of additional whatever happening around you. that.
Oh, yeah. Me too, but then I realized there's like nothing actually there to distract me. So I was like, all right, so we're just gonna work now.
That's fair. That's fair. That's a good way to go about it. So, Anjali, can you tell us a bit about the safety precautions that were implemented by Stony Brook University for the fall semester as a person who was staying on campus?
Yeah, so when I first came back, obviously there's only a small percentage on campus right now, but they have weekly testing, and after Thanksgiving break, they changed the weekly testing to bi-weekly testing. So you always make sure that, like you're getting tested, and if you don't get tested, you are potentially able to get kicked off of housing. So it's pretty good, and obviously you have to wear your masks every day when you go outside. And if you do turn out to be positive at any time, they make sure that they put you in a quarantine place, and they make sure that everyone around you has been tested as well.
Okay. So do you think the university was successful in making sure those restrictions were followed, or did you see people kind of disregarding these restrictions that were put in place?
I think because there was such a small percentage that actually came back to campus, I think it was much easier to make sure that everyone was following these precautions. Because I know that at other colleges, there was so many people came back to campus. So for them, they had a harder time making sure that everyone was doing that. But at Stony Brook University, I definitely saw that they were able to kind of keep everyone together because there was so little people on campus.
Right. But as a university that's located in Long Island and very close to New York City, were there any restrictions placed on travel or just coming in and out of the campus?
Yeah, so I think for the break, they wanted a lot of people to go home and not come back. So they made it so that they're gonna have finals at home. So if you're gonna go home for Thanksgiving break, don't come back to campus unless you really, really want to.
Right.
And so even after break, it's like a ghost town right now. There's not a lot of people here either. There's such a small percentage before, and now there's an even smaller percentage on campus right now.
Mm-hmm. So if it is a ghost town, why did you decide to go back to campus?
So obviously I feel that for me, at least, being home and studying for finals is so distracting because I now share a room with my sister, and it used to be my room, but now it's my sister's. But for me, I cannot study in a household where people are always talking. Yeah. So it's much easier for me to study for finals on campus because the library is open, Starbucks is open, and it's a lot easier that way.
That's fair. Yeah. Niranjana, do you know was UT Austin completely remote this semester, or did they have in-person instruction as well?
I think they started out having a couple classes as hybrid, so half in person, half online. And then the majority of them ended up going online within the first week of classes, because I think it is just such a big university. But there are still, I believe, a few classes that stayed in person or hybrid throughout the entire semester.
Right.
I personally had all online classes, but I think there were a few in labs and stuff like that were in person.
Mm-hmm. So why did you choose to stay home?
I think ultimately it was just easier to stay home. I figured I didn't really have an excuse to go back almost because all of my classes are online, and all of the clubs and organizations are also being held online. And so, yeah, I just didn't think that, there was a reason to go back, especially if I could stay home with my family as well and spend extra time with them. So I just opted to stay home.
Right. And Anjali mentioned that she's rooming with one of her best friends, but did you have did any of your other friends go to school and dorm there or live in the proximity of the university, or did most of the people stay home?
I think it was pretty half and half. A lot of my friends did go back, but my roommates actually stayed home. So I thought, if I'm just going to go back and ultimately live by myself for that semester, I think it's just better off being home. And all of us agreed that's the logic that we were going to go with, and I'll stay home. So we don't know about next semester, but for now we just decided to stay home.
Right. That makes sense. So Anjali, you are part of a sorority, as you mentioned. So I want to hear a little bit about what your experience was like being a part of sorority and just living in campus in general with these restrictions in place. What was that like?
Yeah, so being in a sorority, we have a lot of events that are held, that are supposed to be held in person.
Mm-hmm.
However, because of Corona, we're not able to do those events anymore. And even the chapter meetings that we have to do them all on Zoom. But the one thing I noticed was that a lot of the sorority members, some of the sorority members were able to come back on campus. So it's nice, like if I'm going to get breakfast, if I'm going to get lunch, just to see those like friendly faces on campus. It's so nice. Even my big also came back to campus, so I get to see her sometimes. But I think that was a major reason for me to come back as well, because there were so many people who I knew that were on campus. I just wanted to see them.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you just recently joined the sorority as a sophomore. Did you find it difficult to, I guess, connect with other members of your sorority because you went remote just pretty soon after you joined?
Yeah, for sure. I think that sometimes it was really hard for, like, obviously everything was done over Zoom, because even when I joined, we were sent home almost immediately after.
Mm-hmm.
So because of that, I wasn't able to get the full sorority experience that other people might have gotten, but it was still really nice to have people to come back to.
Right.
Even if I didn't play them.
So how did you kind of adapt these events to an online format? I know you mentioned Zoom, but how did that work? Can you give an example of one?
Yeah, so I think we have like little events, like fundraising events.
Mm-hmm.
They're mostly done on social media now. So if you see like any like bingo boards on Instagram, that's usually like a sorority thing. But a lot of the fundraising is done through that, and because of that, you can like there's many ways where you can do those events online through Zoom. So.
Mm-hmm. Did you think what was your impression of them? Did you find them to be as engaging as they would be in person, or?
Obviously, it's not as engaging as it would be in person, but it is the best we could have done during this time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was really good.
Mm-hmm. So Niranjana, you're a member of the Women in Business Association at UT Austin, which also went online. So what was your experience like partaking in that club in a virtual environment?
Right, yeah. So this year I was the financial director. So the typical financial director would be in charge of, dues and membership, but as well as catering, which I think was a little bit different this semester. Because we were online, all of our meetings were held online, all of our events were held online. We didn't have the need for catering, so that was kind of a huge portion of my job that was kind of taken away. So I kind of acted as more, I guess, help to the other executive board directors, and kind of seeing the transition for them as well was pretty interesting. For example, the philanthropy director. When you think of philanthropy, you think of going in person and helping people, and that obviously wasn't really an option this semester, especially since the organization is so big that it would just be impractical to have all of us go safely and volunteer somewhere. So we kind of worked through, and our philanthropy director was really good at picking, new online ways to help people, and I think that was really interesting to see. And ultimately, I think our members were able to still get a lot out of it, though it wasn't in a traditional setting, or at least I hope. I think it went a lot smoother than we expected, though.
Right. And what are your plans for next semester, should this pandemic unfortunately continue?
Yeah. Well, so we're doing a lot of planning over winter break for events and stuff like that in the spring. And we are, keeping with the assumption that it is going to be online again for the rest of the semester. And so I think now we all have a lot better idea of what planning events and engaging members looks like online. And so I think this upcoming semester will have a lot of events where we're able to still have member engagement, even though it's in an online setting, and we're a little bit more confident with the content and events we're putting out for our members.
Right. And I think for sororities and fraternities, clubs, all sorts of clubs, I think it's really forcing us to get a bit creative with the way we go about online events too, because I feel like especially in a club that's meant for it's like a social club or even just a club that's highly collaborative in nature, it's kind of hard to adapt to a virtual environment because a lot of the events are meant to be social and help people connect with others, which is funny because social media allows you to connect with a lot of people, but it also kind of is very disconnecting in a weird way. So I think it's definitely caused us to get a little creative, which is good and bad. But do you think that some of these changes that you're seeing in your sororities and your clubs, do you think that they'll continue even after in-person instruction has started up again? Anjali, would you like to?
I think that obviously, like, it's definitely been a big change, but the minute like we're able to, I feel like we probably do more in-person stuff, because if we're able to, then we're gonna try to do as much as we can.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't really know.
That's fair. Niranjana?
I think in terms of clubs and organizations, it's definitely a lot easier to do in person when that becomes an option. Especially since a lot of the people who join our organization are freshmen, and like being a freshman now must be really hard because you haven't had that experience on campus yet. So we really want to try and, help them build relationships with people and find friends and kind of learn what when being a woman in business is. And I just feel that in some aspects, it's a lot easier and a lot better to do in person. In terms of school, though, I think there's a lot of ways that some of the things that have been adapted during the pandemic could stay and have long-lasting effects after the pandemic is over. I found a lot of things that are a lot easier to be done online. Right now it's a necessity, but maybe after the pandemic is over, that may be something that universities seriously consider.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking about even outside of an academic environment, a lot of theater companies and just more artistic fields like that. Obviously, they rely very heavily on in-person events and things like that, but through this virtual route, I mean, anything virtual allows you immediate access to like thousands of people at a time, and they don't have to be in the same place as you. They can be in a whole different time zone. I mean, just like right now, like you're in Texas, you got one Long Island, and then upstate New York. Like that wouldn't have been possible with an in-person event. So I feel like that's a unforeseen advantage to this sort of format. It just allows you to connect with people in a lot of different places, even if it's not in the way that we're used to. But I totally agree with some clubs and organizations. It is a lot easier to have that personalized aspect when you're in person. But so you mentioned very briefly the actual classes and academics part, which is not the important part of college, but we're going to go to that. I have a couple questions about the actual academics. So Niranjana, if you'd like to start, how do you feel that the learning process in itself is being impacted by remote learning models? Do you feel that certain classes are easier than others to be taught virtually?
Yeah, I think it depends a lot on the professor's style of teaching. And also, the student's style of learning. For me personally, some things work and some things don't. A lot of my professors have implemented different styles of teaching. So one of my professors has recorded lectures, and we just kind of watch those whenever we can. And then some of my professors use Zoom. And I personally feel that having that, online Zoom class is a lot easier for me than kind of keeping up with the lectures and watching them at a later time, because I sometimes put it off. And so it's so much easier to just go online, ask the questions if I need to during class, and have those things answered right away than having to email my professor later. And yeah, so I guess all in all, it just depends again on like the learning style and the teacher style. But I personally have found that having Zoom classes is, it's going fine. It hasn't been a huge issue.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. My classes are all 3 hours long, so I think we can all imagine how that would go if all the lectures are recorded and put in the hands of the students to watch at a later time. It would be a very long night, probably the day before finals. So I definitely agree with you there. Anjali, so what do you feel in regards to these remote classes?
Yeah, I agree with both of you. I think that like with the remote like learning models, I think there's like asynchronous and synchronous, which is like having in person, like Zoom and having the lectures already ready for you to watch. I agree that like it can kind of be like not as motivating if you're not getting to watch, like be in class and like be in the Zoom for that. And that has like definitely played a major factor in the learning process for me. A lot of my classes that were on were like asynchronous were actually asynchronous in general. Like even if the pandemic hadn't happened, they would still have these recorded lectures and you'd watch them and then you'd have to do, that's how it was made. So it wasn't as big of a difference for me for having like the remote learning model because it already was a remote learning model.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, there's definitely some classes, I guess more artistic classes or even science lab classes. I can imagine I had a friend who was watching a lab instead of just watching their professor pour something from like a graduated cylinder. And it was just, that must be very, not just difficult to watch, but to understand. And especially if you understand through the actual application of something like that. So I can imagine that being very difficult to translate into an online environment. But so I guess you said that there's some good examples and bad examples of your classes, but what was your favorite class in an online environment and why do you think it was your favorite class? Ranjana, you think so?
Yeah, so my favorite class was actually not one that I thought was going to be my favorite class. It was a management information systems class. So it was like a database management class on, more technical, like coding and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, okay, like I'm going to take it, but we'll see how it goes. And I think the material was interesting for sure, but I think more than that, it was just my professor. Right now, a lot of people are going through Zoom fatigue and just like, other external issues, and they don't really want to pay attention during class, and it's really hard to stay engaged. And I think my professor did an amazing job keeping us all engaged, making sure to answer any questions we had, and like, I guess just understanding that we're kind of all going through this together. So he made lectures really fun and really engaging. And I think ultimately that was what helped me understand the material, one, but also continue to stay engaged, not switch my brain off during lecture or have to, zone out. And I really felt that I was learning, and that's, the whole point of the class. So I'm really glad that I got that experience with him.
Right. And how did he kind of engage the class? Was it just through conversation or some other method?
Yeah, so I think there are two main things that really helped. One was the breakout room function. He kind of gave us opportunity to, I guess, talk to our peers, which is hard in an online setting, but we did stuff together and it helped me learn because some students got it better than others and they were able to teach us again, and that was really helpful. Also, I think just his conversational style of lecture was really helpful because our class was not afraid to ask questions, and sometimes I can be a little, I guess, shy to ask questions, so I just kind of like, oh, I'll learn it later, it'll be fine. But because he was so open and conversational, people asked questions, and sometimes I had the same questions and I didn't have to ask it because he literally answered it on camera for us. And so I think, that ultimately made him a really good professor, especially during the online times.
Yeah, and I think a conversational learning style is also, or teaching style is also really beneficial when the content itself is kind of dense.
Yes.
Because it helps lighten. Coding sounds a bit dense, but I feel like that would definitely help lighten the environment a bit. So that's always helpful. Anjali, what was your favorite class?
My favorite class was not one that was major related. It was actually the one class that wasn't part of my major. It was Spanish. Taking Spanish, it was one of the only classes that I had to be online on the Zoom for.
Mhm.
And the teacher made sure that like every single class we had time to go into breakout rooms and kind of work on the things that he had taught. And I think breakout rooms were a major thing that played into like how like the class like actually learned, because when you're having a conversation in Spanish, you want to be able to have that with other people and like and see how they talk. So the breakout rooms was really nice to have in that class, and I think that's why it made that class one of my favorite classes.
Had you taken Spanish before, or was this your first language class?
I had taken Spanish. I'd taken Spanish for 6 years in high school.
Okay.
But
wow, that's a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I took it again, but having it like taking it during a pandemic was definitely different, because in high school we had in person and you could talk to people in person, and taking it during the pandemic you couldn't really see the people that you were talking to. So
right. And do you think that a part of the reason this was your favorite class is because it had this Zoom, like mandatory Zoom attendance, whereas the other ones didn't?
Yeah, I definitely think that, because again, language classes, I think you need to be around people to actually learn it. And you can't like learn Spanish just watching like recorded Zoom lectures. I think you need to be able to practice it with other people. And that's why it was one of my favorite classes, yeah.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you both. And so as the semester comes to a close with finals and all of that ending, what is one thing you've both taken away from this rather unconventional experience, whether it be related to academics or otherwise? Naranjana, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. There's so many things that happened this semester.
You can name more than one. Whatever comes to your mind.
I think just, you know, a lot of being on Zoom and being home and online has just been very self-motivated. So I think I've learned a lot about, you know, my learning style and what works for me, and like how to, you know, self-motivate myself in order to finish all the tasks and make sure that I'm not, you know, sitting on my phone during class or just not being engaged. So I think that definitely helped me to realize what works for me and what doesn't work for me academically. And being home and kind of not having too many distractions has really allowed me to like learn what helps me focus, how do I study, and you know, those type of things are really helpful for, you know, the next semester and my year after, but also when I start working, and you know, these things also come in handy and are good to learn about now. So I think that's really helped me.
Definitely. I still need to learn more about how.
Oh, I have a lot to still learn.
About ways
little
to
bit.
go. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I agree. And those things, as you said, manifest themselves in various places of your life. So that's very helpful. Anjali?
Yeah, I think that this semester was definitely a growing experience for me as well. I think I really learned about how I, you know, like study in general, because I definitely wasn't the best studier and I wasn't like really good at managing my time. And I think that that's one of the major things I learned was like organizing everything so that I can get things done on time. And I think it made me a better academic person. Like I think I learned a lot about myself academically, and
Yeah. Well, let's hope next semester is just as much as a learning experience as this one. But thank you so much for joining me this evening on the Asian American Herald. And thank you everyone for watching. I'm Shruti Natanmai, and our wonderful guests for today were Naranjana Srihari and Anjali Arvind. Please send us your story ideas and look for the recording of this show on our Facebook page. Have a good evening, and thank you again.